Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am going to do another story time, and this is a very true and very real story. It's not meant to challenge anyone's beliefs or religion. Take the story at face value. If you are one that does not believe in the paranormal, this is probably not the video for you, and you should probably click off now. For those of you that are new to the channel or just don't know, Jess is my daughter. When Jess was about 3 years old, my husband and I were taking her to her annual checkup at her doctor's. As we were driving, we stopped at a stoplight outside of a school. Jess says in her little munchkin voice in the back seat of the car, "Mommy, I used to go there." I was in the front seat rustling through my purse looking for our insurance card, and I responded, "Go where?" without even looking up from my purse. And she said, "Sleepover school." I remember stopping and looking out the window and seeing the school. I then looked around the car seat into the back seat and said, "Jess, you never went to school. What are you talking about?" And she looked at me and said, "Yes, I did." I looked at my husband and sort of whispered, "What is she talking about?" And he said, "Probably seen it on a cartoon." So we sort of just shrugged it off. A few nights later, we were home and Jess was in her room playing. Her brother was in my room playing with his trains on the floor. And I hear Jess having a full-blown, serious conversation. I stood on the outside of the bedroom door for a little while listening to her talking with a very serious inflection in her voice. So I opened the door and I walked into the room, and she was standing in front of the mirror talking to someone or something I couldn't see. "Jess," I said very calmly, "who are you talking to?" She turned around and looked at me with the most serious face a 3-year-old could have and said, "I'm talking to John." My eyes darted around her bedroom quickly, reassuring myself that no one was there. "Who is John?" I said. She responded with, "He's my husband." I looked at her sort of confused and said, "What are you talking about? Who's John?" She then told me about the girls. She said that she was talking to the girls, telling them that they need to clean up their room. At this point, I had chills going up and down my spine. This was the type of thing that you've seen in every basic, typical horror movie. I remember trying to distract her and told her it was time to get ready for bed. She looked at me and said, "Okay, Mommy, let me say goodnight to the girls first." She then turned back to the mirror and started talking in what sounded like a mixture of baby talk and some other language I've never heard before. She then said, "Okay, Mommy, let's get ready for bed." I remember getting her and her brother tucked in for the night and made a beeline for my husband. I told him everything that happened, and he was like, "So she has an imaginary friend and a very active imagination. That's good," he said. "Let her be." I remember feeling super uneasy about it, but figured maybe I was just being overly concerned and maybe I should let it go. A few nights go by, and at this point it's like 1:30 in the morning. We were all asleep and Jess was wide awake talking very loudly in her room. I remember getting out of bed and making a mad dash for her room. I opened the door and there she is in front of the mirror again. "Jess, what are you doing? It's 1:30 in the morning." She looked at me and said, "I'm mad at John." I walked over to her and I grabbed her by the hand and lead her back to bed, and she stopped walking and was looking up at me. So I asked, "Why are you mad at him?" And she said, "Because he killed me." At this point, my blood literally ran cold. I looked at her and I said, "Jess, why would you say something like that?" She said, "Because he killed me." I didn't know what to say. I was so freaked out, but I didn't want her to pick up on that. I remember tucking her back in and sitting next to her bed all night. I wound up falling asleep myself, just sitting there, watching her. My husband woke up the next morning to find me in her room and woke me up asking me why I was in there. I quietly walked out of her room and into ours and told him what Jess had said. At that point, even he thought it was a little strange, but again, trying to ease my mind, told me it was probably just her overactive imagination. I honestly couldn't wrap my mind around it. Why would she say he killed her? My kids were never exposed to anything scary at that age. They watched all age-appropriate shows and were not exposed to horror movies or anything scary for that matter. So I couldn't explain away why she would say that he killed her. I just couldn't get the fact that she said that out of my mind. I was now debating if I should probe her for more information or just let it go. So she and her brother wake up, her brother finishes his breakfast and goes to watch Blue's Clues. So I took this opportunity to sit down with her and say, "Jess, will you tell me about John and the girls, please?" She says, "Oh, sure, Mommy." Now, keep in mind I'm telling you this story from Jess's point of view in full-blown sentences. She had just turned 3 years old. She was not speaking in absolute perfect sentences. I'm just basically telling you it in full sentences so you can understand the context, if that makes any sense. She said that John and the girls lived in the Love City, which we later eventually pieced together was Paris. She told me that she went to sleep over school there, and that's where she had met John. She started to tell me about how she misses her dresses. She said to me that they were really long and really heavy dresses, but they were pretty and she missed them. She described the town she lived in. She said that she lived near water and that the streets were cobblestone. She actually used the word cobblestone, which blew my mind again because she just turned 3. She had no idea what cobblestone was. She then told me that she would have to go out to the barn and feed her horses, but she would have to take a candle for light. She told me that John was her husband and that they had twin girls. She told me her girls were very pretty. When I asked her the names of her girls, she said both names very matter-of-factly, but it didn't sound like English. She told me the girls were 8 and they both had very, very long, pretty brown hair. She told me that John killed her, and I said, "Well, how did he kill you?" And she said he pushed me down the stairs. And I looked at her and I said, "Why would he do it?" And she said he was mad at her for not feeding the horses. I remember being completely scared. She looked at me and asked if she could go and watch Blue's Clues with her brother, and I told her yes. I remember being so freaked out because I didn't know what this was. Was this an overactive imagination or was this something more serious? Did I need to take her to a doctor? Was there something emotionally going on? I remember my mother coming home from work, and at this time we lived with her, and I told her everything. My mom says it sounds like she's telling you her past life. So my mom questions her, and she tells my mom the exact same story she tells me. Now I'm convinced that my daughter is being followed by ghosts. My mom basically gave me the advice not to poke or prod her for info, and don't bring it up unless she does. I take my mother's advice, and all seem to go quiet for about 3 weeks. She doesn't bring up John or the girls, and neither do I. Everything seemed to be fine. This John and the girls thing seemed to be behind us. Then one night, Jess was in a very difficult mood. She didn't want to go to bed. She wanted to sit up and talk to John. I was getting very aggravated and told her John needs to leave now. That John does not tell her what to do. I do. And she needs to listen and go to bed. She carried on telling me that she doesn't want him to go, and that he is mad at me that I'm making him leave. And I remember saying out loud, "You need to leave my daughter alone. Leave this room now." I will admit, saying it out loud now seems a bit crazy, but at that point I didn't care. I remember her saying, "Fine. He left, but he hates you." She was so overtired that she fell asleep quickly. I shut her door and I walked into my room. The way the house was set up, our bedrooms were connected but separated by a door. I came out and sat down on my bed, and my husband was sitting at the desk. I was telling him how difficult it was to get Jess to sleep when the bedroom door started shaking very, very hard, like someone was on the other side of it, rattling it as hard as they could. My husband and I both jumped up as fast as we could, and he ran into the room. And Jess was sound asleep. My husband backed out of the room slowly and just looked at me and said, "What the hell was that?" I just stood there shocked, and I looked at him and I said, "John." He looked at me and said, "That is really, really weird." That same situation kept happening with the bedroom door, multiple times in the following weeks. It happened so frequently that we were actually becoming immune to it. As the months were going on, Jess would mention John more and more, and I remember doing research online about children that would speak of things like this. I was looking for explainable answers. I wound up finding a forum online where there were other parents that had children that were saying the same sort of things that Jess were saying, as in referencing events that had happened to them. The way they explained it is they are newly crossed over to this life and they still remember things vividly from their past lives. Some of the parents were even able to trace their children back in history with information that their children had given them. To this day, I have not looked it up. For some reason, that really freaks me out. I was able to speak with someone from the paranormal community who was an expert on regression of past lives. I will be honest, I was very skeptical. And I don't know, maybe I still am. I took what she said with a grain of salt. She had told me because Jess was so young and able to speak with her daughters and her husband, and that she was able to see spirits. She said it's not uncommon for young children to be able to see spirits. She said that she was very deeply attached to her girls and still feels the need to mother them, which in a crazy way is very Jess-like. She mothers her brother all day, every day, since she could walk and talk. If I gave her a cookie, she would hold out her other hand so I could give her one for her brother. She is still like that with him to this day, 16 years later. She told me that I should just allow her to talk to them and that I should allow her to talk about John. She told me over time these conversations will fade. As she gets older and pulled more into this world and pulls away from the other world, she will slowly begin to forget. I told her about Jess's bedroom door and how it would shake, and she said it very well could have been John, angry at the fact that Jess had to listen to me and not him. She said as the memory of him fades that he will no longer be an issue. I wish I could say that conversation made me feel better, but it didn't. I really was unnerved and uneasy. I was basically just told that my daughter sees dead people. As Jess got older, she indeed slowly stopped talking to me about John and the girls. I remember about 6 months ago, she was sitting on the couch eating ice cream, and I looked over at her and I said, "Jess, do you remember John and the girls?" She looked at me and smiled. She said, "I do." She said, "I remember very little, but I do remember talking about it." I asked her if she remembers telling me about how he was her husband and the girls were her daughters, and how she would have to feed the horses and go into the barn with a candle, and how John killed her. She looked at me like I was telling her a foreign story. She said, "I said all that?" She was really shocked. I was like, "Yeah, you used to tell me these stories about him all the time." She looked up from her ice cream and said, "Wow, I must have been a really creepy kid." Well, that's it, guys. That is 100% true story of what I have gone through with Jess when she was little. There's tons more that goes to that story. I have stories like this that have happened in life to me. If this is something that you guys do like, let me know in the comments below, and I will definitely do more of these. Thank you so much for listening. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you soon.